right, we're talking about Drake and Kendrick Lamar's birth chart. This is the thrilling conclusion to the three-part series. First, we did Kendrick's chart, then we did Drake's chart. Now we're talking about their charts together, as well as some of the key dates in the beef. I think first, let's just look at their charts together. Just for my own integrity, I want to acknowledge that I misspoke a little bit about Kendrick's chart. Okay, I said he was in a 10th house year. That's wrong. He's actually in a second house year.
Oh.
Last year, when the beef started, he was still 36 in a first house year. It was ruled by Venus and the ninth house. And now he's in a second house year, which is more about resources and money. And that's ruled by Mars, which is still in the 10th house. So the 10th house is still relevant. These really public parts of the chart are still relevant, but they're secondary to the themes of self. Who am I? How do I show up in this world? What do I prefer? What do I need? Who am I at my core? And then second house is all about money and resources and the physical stuff we need to sustain the first house stuff. Something that's really interesting about Kendrick's first house is that he has the south node in the first house, and literally a signification for that is humility, because the south node brings decrease wherever it goes. So putting less emphasis on yourself. And then the north node is always opposite the south node. And the seventh house, where we find the north node in Aries, is all about the other. So really having that emphasis on the other and having that emphasis on service. But also, I think sometimes humility comes from a fall, right? And what's interesting is that Kendrick has been victorious in this beef so far. So it's interesting to consider what humility looks like while he is actually the victor in this beef. And is this him actually being humble? It brings the question of service to the forefront for me, because like we talked about when we looked at his chart, there's this emphasis on wanting to make big changes for his community. And it's almost like engaging in this beef. It's like almost like the spiritual battle is service to the community, saying we get to decide who represents us and who is us, right? Not like us. I feel that's what that song is really about. Even though it's like there's this bombastic quality to the beef, it's still within this experience of humility and service, which is super interesting.
That's what really surprised me about that YouTube video or that music video, was how much of it was really about just shining a light on the dancers in the community, on the artists of the community, around the spaces of the community. There are these moments where so many people from the community are all shouting and singing the song, and he's just one of the people almost lost in this crowd that his music helped bring together. And it feels like it's been a real rallying cry. I feel like a lot of the commentary on his latest album has been about how it's really allowed like this West Coast style of rap to be like more mainstream. And yeah, even thinking about his latest music video, I think it was the Squabble Up one, where he just has all of these dancers. It just feels very, yeah, it never feels like it's about him. It's always about the people that he's shining a light on. And it tends to be folks in his community.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. When we look at their charts together, they both have the south node in Libra. And Drake, his south node is closer to Lamar's ascendant. It's very close. It's in a 3-degree range, which is really sensitive. So there's something just inherently triggering for Kendrick about Drake. Kendrick is going to be triggered by Drake. And then when we look at some of these personal points, like Drake's moon, which is all about his emotions, his sensitivity, the way he cares for himself, that is right on top of Kendrick's Mars and Mercury, which is all about battle and speech and poetry and creativity and communication. And inherently, the way that Kendrick communicates is a little bit maybe argumentative, or there's like a quality of like aggressiveness to the way he communicates because Mars is there beside Mercury. But then we bring that and we put it right on top of this super sensitive planet. There is maybe a long game that Drake can play with this placement because the moon loves to be in Cancer. It's very dignified and it has a lot of resources. So if Drake is able to lay low and gather his emotional strength, it's possible that he comes through with a lot of resilience, maturity, and if Drake is able to take the invitation to really slow down, he might come out with a lot of emotional depth.
Mm. A few years ago, Kendrick had a verse on the song called Control that kind of sent
Mm-hmm.
shockwaves through the rap game, where he
Yeah.
basically calls out a lot of rappers and is like, y'all do better, be better. And Drake is one of those rappers apparently who was called out. And when interviewed about it, Drake felt very much like, you call me out on this rap song, but then whenever I see you in person, it's all love and you're all friendly and stuff. And people were saying, well,
Mm-hmm.
hell, it's rap, it's like different. And he was like, nah, I just feel like it's fake though. It's if you're gonna talk about that, like when I see you talk like that. And it spoke to that thing around the sensitivity around expressing yourself and communicating. And yeah, Kendrick being able to be aggressive in that way and Drake taking it personally and it leading to eventually what will become this huge career defining battle.
Yeah. Ooh, I really love what you said about games because Mercury is really into games and then Mars loves to play hard. And so maybe there is a playful quality to the way that Kendrick is coming with this. And maybe there's a sense of don't take yourself so seriously, right?
There's it's hard to not take things personally. But in I think it's Euphoria maybe or I think it's Euphoria. He just has some line where he's making fun of Drake and he just says, "What is it? The braids?" And he just makes because for a while Drake was doing braids. And I was like, that would hurt my feelings. So there is this like it's very there's this also a schoolyard energy to it where it's like
Yeah.
out you're not going to be bothered when someone makes fun of you in that way because you're like whatever I'm trying new styles it's cool but if you
Mhm.
are sensitive it's those little things that will hurt your feelings. It's so interesting.
And Drake definitely is sensitive. I think also he has a certain, they both have North Node and Aries, and he has Drake's North Node is tightly conjunct Kendrick's Jupiter, and Jupiter expands everything it touches. So the North Node often has to do with our sense of ambition and what we want, what we are driven towards. So it's possible that Kendrick is able to look at Drake's ambition and just thwart it a little bit, have a little bit of, yeah, just throw a little cream pie at him for no good reason. And in the long run, I do think this kind of reinforces what I said earlier about Drake coming out of this with some emotional resilience. I think that this will make Drake even more ambitious in a longer view because he'll understand that if he wants to get to another level of fame, acceptance, basically have, the popular opinion again, he's going to have to really level up. So
Mm.
there's a little bit of, and the Jupiter and Aries is very much, it's very similar to Mars because it's ruled by Mars. And so there is again this quality of sparring, this quality of being really playful and like maybe a little mean, maybe a little bit just yeah, like dragging someone for fun.
Yeah.
And then yeah, also like pursuing someone aggressively. Kendrick is probably going to continue pursuing Drake in this way. Um
It's
so
interesting because one of the parts of Not Like Us is, basically Kendrick calls Drake out for his level of strategy when it came to growing in his career and the different people that he partnered
mm,
with. He was like, okay, you wanted this person for clout, you wanted this other person to be put on, you wanted this person so the South would like you. And basically criticizing a level of strategy that supported Drake's ambition to be a very successful rapper. So it's interesting that in one context that could be celebrated as wow, this actor from Canada took over the rap game in this really strategic way because he realized who had the levers of influence, he connected to them and he got resource and he did what he needed to do. And Kendrick sees it and takes offense to it and calls it out.
So interesting. Another cool kind of interaction between their charts is Drake's moon in Pisces is close to, nope, Kendrick's moon in Pisces is close to Drake's Jupiter in Pisces. And so we've got the Jupiter North Node interaction over here, like we just talked about with the ambition and the mean, the kind of like the playful meanness, and then and the exposing of the strategy. I love that you called that out. That's so good. And then here we've got Kendrick's sense of emotional health, emotional well-being, sensitivity enlarged by Drake. Drake shows up with Jupiter and Pisces, just putting a spotlight on the what Kendrick cares about the most.
Wow.
Kendrick can't help but feel like, oh, this is part of my mission. The things that you make larger than life through your relationships and the way those relationships show up on the world stage, like those are things I really care about.
Mm.
So that's another reason why I think this is a longer term beef, because there's like a greater energetic investment, and it has gone on for a while. And even though there have been no tracks recently, we know that Drake has started the process of suing Kendrick, so we know this is gonna go on.
Mm-hmm. At least until the Super Bowl. And then he's going on tour and he literally did a second. He has apparently he sold out the first show and is doing a second show in Toronto for Kendrick's tour with SZA. So it's even little stuff like that is just like poking at not
His
only did I,
hometown.
you know what I'm saying? I'm gonna do two shows and I'm gonna have your own friends and family like on my side calling you all types of names. It feels so personal.
Mm, mm. That's crazy. And then Drake's midheaven, which is the most visible part of his chart, the thing that most people can see about him, even if they don't know him at all, that's touching Kendrick's eighth house, which is this more hidden place. And it's more about like the shadow side of relationships. And sometimes it's referred to as the place of gains from other people's losses.
Mm.
So there's this sense of Kendrick becoming aware of not only what how he can play this game and kind of like benefit from Drake's losses, but also how the way Drake shows up is it feels like a personal attack even when it's not, because it probably exposes certain early traumas that he had or that he witnessed in his community, and he was like, this is sad, I hate this,
Mm.
this should stop. I think for Kendrick, this is personal in a way that's also a little bit political. And for Drake, it's just totally personal.
Interesting. It makes me think of the line from Not Like Us or there was a back and forth where Drake said that Kendrick raps like he's trying to free the slaves. And then in
Mm-hmm.
Kendrick's song, he says they're still calling us slaves. So this thing of it is very much political for Kendrick.
Wow. That's another level of self-awareness. And also, Kendrick is able to shift the cultural perception of Blackness in a way that Drake does not have access to, right? And I think also Kendrick in this is literally not like us, you're not like us. But also, you don't get to tell people what it means to be Black.
Mm.
Um, which it's complicated, but yeah.
He's got a lyric where he literally says, I don't even like it when you say the N-word. He's I really am not a fan of you, bro. So yeah,
Yeah,
that's
makes
real.
sense. But yeah, those are their charts together. They definitely have some overlapping sensitivities. And then I want to look at their charts with the March 22nd date highlighted, because that's the date that the first diss track dropped.
Mm.
And so what's really interesting about that is it was during eclipse season. So eclipses, it's when the sun or the moon or both hang out near the nodes, and you either don't see the sun at all during the day or all of a sudden it's really bright moon at night, right?
Mm.
So there's this sense of reality being turned upside down, eclipses in the ancient world were seen as omens of power being reversed. So sometimes people who were political figures or just like prominent public figures had like strange things happen to them where their fortune was reversed or somehow chaos erupted in their lives. So it makes sense that these prominent people who actually have the same, like the nodes in the same signs as the eclipses that were taking place, they were personally affected by this eclipse. Those two first diss tracks on March 22nd and then again on April 30th, they bookended eclipse season basically. Not only were they personally affected by eclipse season, they were like setting the tone for this
Mm-hmm.
eclipse season. And Aries and Libra is so much about war and peace already. Aries is really martial. It's ruled by Mars and it's also the masculine daytime Mars energy. So it's very much like an army of soldiers. And then Libra is ruled by Venus and it's more about harmony and diplomacy, actually. So it's interesting when we have this North Node eclipse in Aries, their beef begins and it starts setting up the beef for the rest of the year.
All I
That
know
I
is that there was a track that Drake put out after Not Like Us that no one really resonated with. So that's the last one I've heard of. And Drake put out some kind of Instagram post talking about round two's coming up. And then everyone clearly read Kendrick Lamar's Super Bowl announcement where he said, no round twos as a clear indicator that like it's what's done is done. I
yeah. So Drake he was still in his second house year. And so he was ruled by Mercury, which is in Scorpio. And even when he entered his third house year, is Venus also in Scorpio. So he's just, yes. And then even when he was in his first house year, the previous year, it was ruled by the sun, which also goes back to the fourth house. And like I said in Drake's chart reading, the fourth house is all about family secrets. And so I think the secret about his child and then all of these illicit love affairs that he was having, that was coming out in the months. I want to say a year prior to the beef, we were all kind of hearing more about it. So it's interesting that as he's having all of these like fourth house activations, we're getting more and more information. And then as he as he entered the third house year, which would have been 24th October 2024, he started making arrangements to file a lawsuit. He was like, okay, I've had enough. I've had enough. I'm ready to be done. And I'm very curious, but I'm going to make a loose prediction right now and say that the lawsuit may not be complete until Drake is 40
Wow.
because he's still going to be in the fourth house when he comes to his 39th birthday.
Mm.
So yeah, right now he's 38. And yeah, he's going to be dealing with fourth house stuff for a while. And his chart points back to the fourth house a lot. In any case, he's getting exposed. He's getting exposed. And I think there's a lot that he's inherited that he's going to keep looking at and confronting and like revealing to himself over the course of his life. That's just the way his chart is set up.
Oh. What's interesting about the lawsuit is that one of the things he did was say, oh, there were all these bots that were supporting the streams for Not Like Us. It wasn't actually genuine people. And then it seemed to be that actually he was the one and his label was the one. They're both, I think, under the same label, but his music was actually being supported by bots. So this thing of turning and trying to
Mm,
attack the other person is just revealing someone's own secrets. But I can't speak to
yeah.
exactly what's going on there, but it's part of the conversation.
Yeah. No, it's true. Yeah, the whole beef seems to be about exposing Drake's secrets.
Yeah. Oof.
But yeah, so he was in a Mercury year when the beef started. And on the day that Kendrick dropped that track, transiting Mercury was conjunct his North Node in Aries, which is also the eclipse activation. And the nodes create the eclipses basically. So they're these hypothetical points in the sky when the sun and the moon come to those points, they aren't visible from Earth in the same way that they typically are. So that's what creates these eclipses. So Mercury came to sing a song that kind of activated Drake and propelled him forward towards
Mm,
letting out some of his rage, activating a bunch of Aries themes of combat and just needing to fight.
mm,
And Mars in his chart is in the seventh house, which is all about relationships, but also Mars is a little more constructive for him because he was born at night. So maybe this is a time where he's forced to fight for his relationships and be like,
mm,
no, but I am showing up in all of these ways, and here's how I'm trying to show up, and I'm doing my best. And don't you see me how I'm doing my best? And
mm,
of course, Kendrick comes around and is, it's not enough. But yeah, it makes sense that Drake would be like, I'm doing my best. I'm really trying to show up here in this part of my life. And
mm.
it's also a challenging part of his life.
And I feel
Yeah.
like the more someone gets beaten down, the more we collectively start to feel and then root for their comeback. And I think we
Yes.
do know that Drake has been a hit maker, has made so many bops, and has the capacity to make many more. And
Yeah.
if there's one thing I know about the human race, is if he puts out a song that we like, we are gonna we will write like
It's true.
all it takes is a few songs that really resonate. And as you said, if he does that and it works to get to the point where he can create that kind of music that really lands with people, are going to be cheering his comeback. We want people to grow, we want people to expand, we want them
That's true.
to rise from the ashes. Yeah, I think
So
it's
true.
inevitable.
Yeah, and I think he can. I think he's capable. He's just gonna, I think, gonna go through a few more years of challenges, and then when he turns 40, I feel like there may be the beginning of an ascent because he's coming out of this like really dark, secretive part of the chart, and he's coming into the fifth house, which is more about play. Saturn is still there, so it's like really challenging in the sense that there are like literal law and order. There are like norms and social responsibilities that he may be called to just show up for and do some due diligence around. And then the sixth house year is coming back to relationships for the seventh house year, but sixth and seventh house years are also going to be ruled by Saturn. So it'll be more challenging, but it's coming to this lighter place where we've come from family secrets and we're going up to relationships, which is a place where Drake is like very inspired to show up and inspired to be like, look at me, like I'm doing my best. And then eighth house year, I think will be really good for him. And the last time he was in an eighth house year, that was like when he had his summer jams. And when he was in the seventh and eighth house years, that's when we had the hits Hotline Bling and In My Feelings. I think it's gonna take him a few years, but he's gonna ascend out of this. And like you said, we want to cheer him on. We want him to grow from this.
Mm.
And I think he will. I think he will. I think I agree. And then I want to look at what was happening for Kendrick on that day when the beef started when he dropped this song. So yeah, he was having a nodal return as well. It wasn't quite exact yet, but by the end of the beef, both Drake and Kendrick Lamar would have had their nodal returns, which would have affected Kendrick a lot more personally because his nodes are in the first and seventh houses, which, like I said, are all about the self and about the other, how we show up for ourselves, how we show up for other people. And so Kendrick was a year younger than Drake. So he was in the first house year, like I said earlier, when he dropped the beef. And Venus in the sky was conjunct Saturn in Pisces. Ooh, which is so much about accountability, also taking distance from people.
Mm.
Interestingly, it can be about being in relationship with elders.
Hmm.
And I wonder if that's more symbolic of like how parents show up for their children and how Kendrick was calling out Drake for not showing up for his child. But yeah, Venus and Saturn has together, it's like really high standards in relationships and
Mm.
also needing a lot of structure and a lot of distance in relationships as well.
It's interesting too, because we also truly know such a fraction of what they're actually experiencing in their personal life. We only know
Totally.
the headlines and what they release in their music. So there really could be something with Kendrick's granddaddy, but we just don't know about it because it's not public.
How are you feeling about maybe looking at some of the other dates in the beef?
I'm really curious about the date of the Super Bowl, if you'd be interested.
Let's do that. You
So
know what date it is?
let's
What's
find
the
out
date of the
together.
Super Bowl?
Super Bowl 2025 is going to be on Sunday, February 9. Kickoff is at 6:30 p.m.
Ooh, the Super Bowl. Oh my gosh, he's having his Mars return.
Whoa.
What's interesting about Mars is that every 2 years or so, it comes back to the same place in the sky. That's just the speed at which it moves. But for some reason, Mars tends to go retrograde more often in the signs Leo and Cancer than other signs. And I think that's fascinating from the perspective of like breaking down the signs and the planets archetypally and thinking about how if the chart is this entry point into inherited planetary karma, basically, there's something about Mars in these signs of Leo and Cancer that we're all working through collectively in different ways, and we're showing up for it in different ways. And the people who have Mars in Leo and in Cancer especially are showing up for that shift in Mars things. So Mars things are masculinity, aggression, how we fight, how we assert ourselves, how we pursue things, how we work, how we accomplish tasks step by step. And there's also this brute force quality to Mars that in Cancer is a little thwarted because Cancer is very soft, flowy, it's ruled by the moon, it's more feminine side, it's more emotional. But then Mars gets to show up in this aggressive way for these more feminine causes. And I
Mm.
spoke to this a bit in the Kendrick reading, but there's this real defender of women and children in general that Mars and Cancer has, or defender of underdogs or people in positions of marginalization, people who are like not safe, people in domestic violent situations, those kinds of things. Mars and Cancer is I want to help you, I want to show up for you. So it's a really interesting placement for those reasons. And on the day of the Super Bowl, literally Kendrick Lamar is having his Mars return in Cancer. Mars will just be finishing up its retrograde, and on the 23rd of February, it goes direct. And so Kendrick has very personally been affected by this retrograde cycle because Mars is going to go direct at 17 Cancer, which is this degree. He has Mars in Cancer natally at 17 degrees, which is the degree that Mars is going to go direct on. So it's like all of this review of how Kendrick shows up in networks and groups, which is 11th house stuff where Mars went retrograde,
Mm.
how he connects with people who he's affiliated with. It also goes back to his professional life and how he's seen on a world stage, how people perceive his strengths, like how his life story kind of culminates into this professional offering, which is all about the midheaven. It's all about the 10th house. And so he's having this moment where it all comes to this grand finale, basically.
Wow.
And I think it'll be a couple weeks after the Super Bowl, when Mars does finally go direct, that he processes some of the things that maybe come up during the Super Bowl.
Mm.
Having Mars close to your midheaven can indicate that you are seen as a provocateur.
Mm.
And so I'm sure he's going to do something provocative at the Super Bowl.
1000%. I'm like, I have rapt attention. I'm like, what is he gonna do?
Uh,
It'll also be not long after the United States presidential inauguration.
that's
And
right.
I'm very curious about what the mood of the country will be, especially because the energy for a lot of Black women following the election was
Mm.
we tried, we're sitting this one out. Like we really tried with y'all being America. So we're chilling now. We did our part. And I'm so curious how that specifically with like Black women and then how Kendrick feels about us. And then this new world that we'll be in as a country around that time. And then this Super Bowl it's very much it might as well be a national holiday. And it is a very bipartisan thing, the Super Bowl. But the
Hmm.
base of the entertainment culture is
Hmm.
very political, and who
Yeah.
plays the Super Bowl and what they do is very political. So yeah, the fact that it's Kendrick's Super Bowl at this time of our life is going to be, I just look forward to it.
Oh my gosh. This is a really big moment for Kendrick. This is a really big moment. And this that piece you bring up around the bridging of the political divide that the Super Bowl can create, because like you said, it's this nonpartisan thing that everybody does. Everybody celebrates, everybody tailgates, everybody gets together. I think Kendrick is going to ruffle some feathers.
Oh.
I think he's gonna make some people very mad. And I say that partially because of Mars here, and also the moon is gonna conjunct Mars later in the day at the degree of his Mars. So I actually want to look at a chart for that day and for the time that you mentioned, because if the moon and Mars are conjunct at that time, it's gonna be like, oh, he's gonna make some personal attacks in his performance, or he may say and share some things that people really feel deep in their soul. But also, Saturn in the sky will be transiting Kendrick's natal moon. And so there will be the sense of separation from maybe things that he finds comforting, places that he goes to emotionally to shield himself or defend himself. He's either gonna, and it might be a both and, where he puts the guard up for some people and then really lets some other people in. So there's this sense of really validating one perspective and then totally invalidating another perspective. Also, Jupiter would have just gone direct on February 4th, so 5 days prior, and it would have just passed his Venus, which is a really important planet for him. So this might actually be a moment where he's lucky, where he does some like super provocative things. Maybe he like ruffles some feathers, people get mad, but Jupiter's there with Venus being like, it's all good. We still love you. You're still a national treasure. You're contributing something to a conversation, a communal conversation that actually is might be triggering and provocative, but is like bringing some overall healing.
That sounds
Yeah,
collective. That sounds
it
like we're doing
is
some
collective.
collective work on the Super
It
Bowl day.
is. Oh my gosh, can we just look at the chart for actually the moment of the Super Bowl? And that's 9th of February 2025 in New Orleans. Ooh, the moon would have just passed over Mars before the kickoff. There, we might actually be going into the Super Bowl with some hurt feelings. And
That
by
feels
we,
true.
Kendrick.
Oh, Kendrick.
Yeah, and maybe the whole crowd watching the Super Bowl may be going in. There may be just like this collective sense of pain going into the
Oh
Super Bowl where we're
no.
like, feeling a little down, honestly. And Moon and Mars together also indicate overconsumption of possibly alcohol, possibly being under the influence. There may be some aggression that comes out of that. I don't know. It's not a happy combo. I'll say that. There's definitely some pain there. And it's possible too that because it's in Cancer where the moon is exalted, the moon is still emotionally, we're still able to be like, oh, you know what? That's painful. And also, we're here to bring some light into this pain. Like, this crack is where the light gets in, kind of thing. That's
Mm.
very possible. And also, there may be some sense of let's numb this pain, also. Let's just.
It's interesting because his first like big hit song was about his relationship to alcohol. And
Mm.
when he talked about in his most recent album about the Super Bowl, one of the things he says is, I had this major accomplishment and only like one or two people actually congratulated me. And instead people were like talking
Mm.
shit on online. It's yeah, it's so interesting what could be coming up for him.
Wow. Oh my gosh. And then the ascendant here is like early Virgo. And then Mercury rules the chart, and Mercury is Cazimi Aquarius, which is like Cazimi is a really nice place for Mercury. It's like a rebirth moment. Cazimi just means in the heart of the sun. So it's not just at the same degree, it's really close in minutes. It looks like, yeah, it's coming out of Cazimi, but still, it's really nice position for Mercury. And Mercury is very much about games. So did an astrologer elect this chart? And it's in the sixth house, which is about work and unequal power dynamics and who's on top of who. There's a real combative sense in the sixth house, as well as a sense of sometimes you have to fight to get the work done. And that feels very football as well.
Totally.
But yeah, there's also with Mercury in this air sign, there is like an intellectual quality to this game that's being played. And so there may be more emphasis the Super Bowl put on possibly transcending our collective grievances. Like Aquarius is so much about creating social coherence through mutually agreed upon values in a way that's not very cozy, in a way that's very much like respect over, like we don't play favorites, we respect each other.
Mm.
So there may be something bonding about the Super Bowl in the sense of, yeah, you're hurting, I'm hurting, we've hurt each other, and also let's play. Let's just have a good
Mm.
time.
We're at the end of December as we record this, right? And so if it's happening into January and then February, we have this other big national thing. It seems there's something is open to be shifted, to be healed, to be seen or witnessed around our relationship to each other and the pain we feel. So
Yeah.
I'm so curious to see what his performance does for that national conversation.
Yeah, I think it's gonna light up a bunch of challenging things and possibly in a way that's fun and digestible and yeah, just enjoyable for everyone.
It'll be on
So
replay for sure.
thank you so much for joining me, Chimdi. I feel like your voice in this collaboration, looking at these charts, has been essential. You've added so much depth and information and insight to looking at both their charts. So I thank you so much, so much.
Thank you
Um,
for inviting me. I'm so glad my chronic onlineness is being put to good use because this
yes.
probably wouldn't come up on my channel, but I get to dive into it with you. And so thank you for the platform.
Yay. And where can people find you?
You can find me at Chimdi on YouTube if you want some one on one support. I'm a creative coach, and you can go on my website, chimdiihezie.com.
Hey. And if you're looking for an astrology reading, you can definitely book some time with me. I will also be hosting an intention setting webinar in early January, so look out for that. If you want more details, you can join my mailing list. And I will see you very soon.